com vocês.
Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, the online festival that asks the question, what if we could redesign everything? We are in week 3 already, which means the final week of the DIF. Today we are joined by Anderson and Andre, who are both partner at Symmetrics. And Symmetrics is a strategy and innovation company. And today we'll focus on strategic design. We have many creative shaping futures for us that makes us believe that some of them are actually true and becoming reality in the future. These imagined realities could be the beginning of great interventions. So this is the topic that we're going to explore today with Anderson and Andre. Remember, this is an interactive session, so feel free to post all your questions or comments in the comments box below this video. And now over to Anderson and Andre. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us. Okay, I think you're still muted. Can you unmute yourself? Yes, ready to go.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Andre.
Hi, my name is Anderson. Hello there.
So we're going to share with you some of our thoughts and experiences around strategic design. We are both Brazilians. We work especially in Brazil, Latin America, and also some parts of Asia and Africa. So what I'm going to do today is really run through a way of thinking and also the way we are approaching creative strategies as a way to design design the future. So the first and question we usually ask ourselves is really what the future will look like in 10, 15, or 20 years. And nowadays, this is becoming a quite common question among entrepreneurs, among designers, among management people. And we usually tend to respond to this question by saying, okay, so let's look at some trends and see what we can do in terms of developing new technologies or new products and services. But at the end of the day, the future for us is but a canvas to our imagination. We brought this quote from Henry Thoreau, North American, and when we think about a canvas to our imagination, that means a white space. We really have the opportunity to fill in this canvas with ideas, with products, with services, and with business. So the big question now is, how do you fulfill this white space? So there is actually a bridge between reality and fiction, and this bridge is really a gap. So it means either we are in the fiction or either we are in reality. So how to fulfill this bridge?
So I think that we need to talk about here is when we start to make this kind of work related to business people, when we create a strategic vision, we introduce another question that, okay, how can we do this with using creativity to create another kind of vision, because it's very common during the strategic business to do that. It's just create a phrase and sometimes create that define the vision of the company and the mission of this company. And so when we start to work together with design and the creative guys and the business people, we like to introduce a little bit more about that. Okay, how can we create another vision? And when we start to figure out about that, we saw that during this process, we touched a little bit about the discussion about the reality that we have now and a new reality that we need to create in the future. And all the time we discussion about that, okay, this is a fiction. So, and start to this discussion, we thought that, okay, the fiction, it's maybe it's unreal or just a reality that we need time to create that. During this discussion, we saw that 3 points, very important points that popped up. One of them is a timeline. All the times we need to check what happened in the past and what will happen in the future. So, but it's not so easy to create that because business people all the time try to look back and see what happened to create a vision of the future. And we try to introduce another way to figure out about that is, okay, we need to look back But in what happened now, the trends that we have in our hands, and maybe what's next after this, if these trends happen, what we could create. So during this discussion, we checked out that something very important. There are a lot of point of view in psychology and religion about the time and the future, and we try to explain, try to looking for something related to that. And in a point of view of psychologists, all the time we just think that what we have in our hands is just this moment, is just today. This is very important, and it's very grateful. But another problem that we have is when you talk about future, we can see that this future, this future, it's related to something that all the times when you create that in today, we have a lot of problem because, for example, when you talk about future, we'll talk about multiple scenarios, multiple possibilities. And when we make this decision by psychologists, all the time we check all the lessons learned that we have in the past and all the expectation that we have in the future. So the present is not more than everything happened in the same time. We are used to think that about time is in a linear way, but when you make this discussion or make this decision, you need to check it out that the past and the future of the past stay in that time, the future of the present, the emergent future is here, and the future of the future, it's popped up in your mind all the time that when you talk about the future. Another thing that we need to check during this job is alternative scenarios, because we create multiple scenarios during the exercise in a creative way, using fiction or non-fiction to describe what happened in the future. And another things that, okay, when you decide to create this feature, what's the future of vision, the future vision that we have, and what preferable future that we are trying to looking for, and to create this for a company, for a society, or something else. So we move, and I'd like to tell a story, old story. In 90s, in the beginning of the 90s, was asked for a guy, a French guy, to create, could you imagine the 21st century and the 100 years from that moment? And they asked him to create some visions of the future. The name of these guys is Jean-Marc Coté, and he's a special guy that they drawing a lot and they make some postcards. And he decided to create a vision of the future during that moment. So if you try to looking for some of these or Googling these, you can Googling their name and you check out these images that I show you now. So there are a lot of images there, and the amazing images, amazing visions of the future. And some of them call my attention and call attention and their attention. It's but two of them, it's a special one. I will show you now that what happened during this exercise with the Jean-Marc Coté. These special figures, it's more related to, okay, maybe the first one, it's one connection with the internet guys that you can input some knowledge in their minds and they connect with the teacher and the lessons and the books use it electrical way. Another one is related to presentation that we are now talking about, that the way that we are doing now, it was imagined by Jean-Marc Coté. This is something that it's happened since the beginning of the humanity. When you're now talking about the future, all the time we try to looking for something that what could happen in the future, or 10 years from now, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. It's something that it's in our imaginary. It's all the time we need to looking for and work with that. But something that caught my attention during this Jean-Marc Coté is, it doesn't matter if you try to look to the future, you have some problem with that, because people in this image was wearing the same clothes in the 19th centuries. This never changed. It's very common that, okay, some service will appear, some technology will appear, but sometimes when you think about the future, it's impossible to create this future without use it with your bias. So this is something that you need to pay attention when you create futures, because you need to know that, okay, I'm trying to looking for something, and during this process, my bias will use it against me or use it to create great futures, but you need to think about that all the times.
So over the last 200 years, we had many artists, literature like Giulio Verne, Mary Shelley with Frankenstein, and any other movie makers. When we have, for instance, Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick, and all these artists, they really imagine a desired future, and sometimes not such an easy future. Sometimes they design it movies and screens for us, displaying dystopias, such as the case of the Mad Max, which was released in number 3 this a couple of years ago. And so this prophets, what we call, they really imagine a future and make us believe that this future might one day become reality. So they really try to reduce this gap between fiction and reality. And this movement also, it's happening a lot in the sequential arts, in the comics. So as you can see here in the Dick Tracy comic, many of the stories, they present us with a future, an idealistic future. As in this case, you can see in the last stripe, you can see a prototype, what is now known as the wearables, or the smartwatch, or the iWatch, something like that. Yeah. And of course, some of you know this movie, quite a famous one, and it was by Stanley Kubrick. It's called 2001, A Space Odyssey. And Stanley Kubrick, he did this movie thinking about emerging technologies by that time. And by that time, IBM was a very strong company, still today. And he imagined that HAL, which is a name for IBM, actually it's an acronym. And the HAL supercomputer was listening to human voice. These two guys here, they were in a spaceship, and they were being controlled by HAL, the supercomputer, and they were planning to turn off the machine, the computer. And HAL was listening, as you know the story, and started to interact with them and trying to complain. Yeah.
So another example that we have here, guys, it's Deus Ex. No? It's a game, a fantastic game that arrived. It's interesting because, in our opinion here, people that work from gaming, gamers now, it's create a different world, and they create a different vision of the future. That we now talk about transhumanity, but when you play this game, you understand a little bit what the effects of this society that could create another disruptive movement in our society nowadays. So how can deal with? And when you play this game, you can realize that everything that will be possible, but all the problems that can occur during this decision, that's okay, we will live as a transhumanity, but and that people that don't live like that, how can we live together? It's possible or not? How can you can make some questions like there is some prejudice about which one have some prejudice, people that is transhumanities or people that's a regular one, like nowadays, you know. So when you start to figure out about the future, use video games or gamers now, it's creating different realities. It's awesome to understand a little bit through their eyes.
Yeah. And also here in Brazil, we have a very interesting initiative. It started last year. It's called Terra 2, in English means Earth 2. And it was, the idea was from a local psychoanalyst. It's called Jorge Forbes. And the concept behind Earth 2, Terra 2, is really to share with everyone and start discussing what is an emerging future in many aspects, such as, for instance, What will be the impact on longevity in our society? What will be, for instance, the impact of artificial intelligence, of life, the family life, work life? What are, for instance, the role of education in this emerging future? So it's really putting into art, into dramatization, to really try to understand and try to discuss a whole interaction around a new world that is coming in.
And this project is very awesome here because it's a disruptive one. You know, using television or using theater as a prototype to prototype futures and discuss with people around you that what happened next. It's amazing, you know, in a psychological way, or if just you figure out about the future and create new technology and use this as a place that you can get some great ideas. So we try to talk to Forbes about this, and I asked him there's a connection with the comic book about the Flash, you know, the Earth 2, but no, it's not connection. It's just the way that they see different worlds living together, and they now some part of people are living this future, and another part of our society living behind of this future, the Earth 1, and there are a lot of people that living in Earth 2. This is very awesome to understand a little bit, and the effect of this in our society, in the consume, the production, and everything that connects with the society. It's something to use theater and television to discuss that. It's awesome.
So now moving into the design part of our presentation. So how we intentionally move into the future. So how do we start creating a future and designing it the way we believe, taking responsibility for the future we are creating.
I remember that I saw this phrase of the best way to predict the future is to create it. I saw this in during another speech here. There are a lot of guys that they give this name. It's sometimes you can, this quote is named by Abraham Lincoln, Peter Drucker, or maybe Buckminster Fuller. But in the end, I tell the truth, it doesn't matter who's the person. I know that's matter who's the person, but the idea behind this is to create that future. This is something that we could check out. Very interesting thing, you know, because when you start to work with the strategy guys from business and design people or creative one, we start to looking for, okay, we will not just use anymore, just trends, economic trends to see what happened in our company or other companies, and how can we use a creative way to figure out about the future and create this as amazing stories or amazing vision that can create purpose and create and connect people and engage that guy from the company or the society around us to believe in that future and work together to create this future and make this happen. This is great stories that we've learned about it. So during this process in our discussion, we had the opportunity to watch the series, the Netflix series. The name is I don't remember. The name is Abstract, and the second episode talking about a guy that's Chicker Hatfield. Chicker Hatfield was responsible for design at Nike, and during these episodes, sorry guys if you didn't watch this yet, if you don't watch this yet, I don't want the spoiler, but this is a documentary, it's great to see. And the Chicker Hatfield use the creativity to create that shoes that was used, we saw in Back to the Futures. And they spent more than 15 years trying to develop this in the reality. And this is some part of this documentary talk about that, you know, to create visions and the work to bring this to life. This is amazing, and this is the idea that we try to connect when we use design, visions, strategy. How can we create a timeline and make companies and the government work for this and they create this future and make this possible?
So another example from Brazil, we brought this, it has related to health technology, emerging technology. So a researcher that was back 10 years ago, it's called Sergio Mascarenhas. He developed what was that, by that time it used to, was a fiction, I mean. And this guy developed a sensor that could make examinations in diagnostics in the cranium, but without being invasive. So the whole concept behind it was really to use sensors and to make this kind of diagnostics. By that time, back 10 years ago, that was the medical scientists and also the doctors were quite skeptical about this technology. And he insisted, and then after 8 years, he really succeeded into building his prototypes, experiments. He funded his projects from seed capital in Brazil with the government, but also with venture capital in the United States, in the Silicon Valley. And nowadays, this technology is really becoming real after 10 years. So it's a good example of how invention developed by scientists, engineers, and technology people can get together with business people. This other guy here, Mr. Targa, he's an entrepreneur, and he met Sergio Mascarenhas and tried to build a business around this idea. So now it's a startup, and it's getting accelerated all over the world.
So during this work, we understand a little bit about which direction or many setups that you can use to create alternative futures and visions of the future. And during this work, we realized that, okay, we have the four principles that you can use to set up the way that you think about the future. First of this is a futurist approach. All the time when you're talking about future, which future we are talking about with? We are talking about problem future. It's related to a mathematical way that I can check back all my history and create an incremental future. Another one, it's talk about possible futures. We know that any future is possible, but which future is more realistic for our scenarios or for our reality? This is something that you need to check out. And another thing that you need to check when you think about a futuristic approach, it's which scenarios or which alternatives you consider preferable for you. You know, it's a desirable for you, for a company, for a society to create that. So this is a key to understand a little bit. Okay, are you create a scenario? Are you create a vision of the future? And which future we are talking about? The problem, the possible, or the preferable one? So this is something that you need to check this.
Yeah. So the idea here is really when you are on the left, this is more of the traditional design. I mean, the traditional design, they try to really build and increment the reality and improve the reality we live in. It's got a human focus, that's why we call it human-centered design. They lead to more incremental innovation, and they are focused on the actual reality, what's happening just now. So the more you move to the right, it's really more fictional, more long-term oriented, and this is the place where you really have the opportunity and intentionality to create new realities.
This is amazing here because we have a chance to talk about these with the guys that work with them, like something like a design thinking or other way of thinking. And the difference between these ways of thinking, it's because one you are focused on now and to change their people's lives and make something great. And the other one is to create new realities. So if you can imagine the future, not the future of design, but new possibilities to work with design, it's to create these scenarios and start to work with. So these paths, like the second pillar, that's the name is risk-taking. for designers or business guys or the government, all the time we discuss about that. Okay, yeah, you create the future, but what we want? You want an incremental one, you want adaptive one, or you want to be a game changer? Because when you try to be a disruptive guy, you know that the risk taking is increase a lot. So this is a discussion that we need to have with the society, and we need to have with the government and the business people themselves. It's something that you need to check out during this process, and you need to pay attention to that. So futurist approach, risk taking, design focus on if I create something for now or human-centered oriented or a fiction-centered. Another point that it's you need to understand is the zeitgeist, because, for example, when you live in Japan, when you live in Europe, when you live in North America, it's totally different the way that you consider time in your life, because the zeitgeist of this country is totally different from the zeitgeist here in the South America, on Africa, or the south part of the globe. And you need to understand that the zeitgeist influence all the design approach that we when you create the future. And this is something that we need to discuss here, and this is the opportunity to discuss here in DIF with you guys, that okay, this is totally different for us when you look to the future, when you guys in the north part of the globe look to the future, you know, or east or west. This is changed a lot.
So now moving to let's share with you some cases. Actually, one specific case we developed here, and it has to do with the experience, the road experience, the experience of roads in the streets. But to introduce that, we will we have this phrase here, this wonderful one from Gibson. The future is already here; it's just not evenly distributed. So the way we really approach this future is by really touching base the emerging future, emerging trends, and trying to really guess with the zeitgeist, with the proper design orientation, with risk taking, also with the future approach, and how we can design it.
So when I was doing this work, we could realize something. We saw something here in Brazil that there are a guy, the name is Criollo. He's a Criollo, he's a musician here, and they has a video clip. He has a video clip about his music and talking about the future and where the technology will increase a lot, but the society will not solve their problems. And when you're talking about distribution, it's not just we're not just talking about technology, but we're not talking about social text. You know, how can we solve this, and how can we deal with? Because here in Brazil we have a lot of things to discussion about. Okay, we can create some. We can use 3D printing. We can use AI. We can use machine learning, we can use blockchain, bitcoins, but these will solving our problem. We are social issues. This is something that we need to pay attention when you create the future, because once again, when you create future in Japan, it's totally different when you see this future here, and the way this will impact the society. So because that, we decided to discuss a little bit more. What's the future here in Brazil, and what this means for us? You know, this is something that we need to pay attention, and we decided to do that with our work here to discussing future in South America and discussing obviously the future here in Brazil.
Yes. So now coming to the case, it's a case of a future lab. So how to describe a future lab? As you can see, future lab works with preferable futures, disruptive kind of change, future-centered realities, and after next zeitgeist. So Future Lab is a good combination of invention, so it has a lot to do with research and developing of new concepts, new ideas, together with researchers, engineers, IT people, design people, and also the business piece of the story. So making these ideas, these concepts happen, and spread them and create them and accelerate them to really make it impact.
3 years ago, we started a journey, and we start to ask ourselves, what's the future of our roads here in Brazil? And with many companies, we start to understand a little bit the main roads that we have here that connect São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And these roads, we start to see that all the problems that we have there. And there are a lot of problems with drug issues, no service, and the streets not so great. And after this, we start to looking for some, in some way, how can we create a new kind of future, that can create a more, how can I say that? It's more sustainable for society. And we create a project, the name Road Experience, and we start to figure out about that. Okay, we have a lot of problem with this, the traffic here. We have a lot of problem with the road. We have a lot of problem with the infrastructure. Maybe in the future we have autonomous car, but we don't have good bathrooms on the streets. And we start to figure out about that and all the technologies that we have now, and how can we use it to solve people's lives and to create futures. Another way to see the roads here in Brazil, with all the limitations that we have in our infrastructure, and not just use technology to create some high tech, but more high concept and high touch design of the road. During this process, we use novels, we use some stories about the future, and we connect this with the young people here to discuss about that, and what could be possible to use it and work with it in the universities and in the society, different ways to create this vision of the future. And during this process, we incubate this in one university here. The name is Mauá, Instituto de Tecnologia Mauá. And we start to, okay, how can we bring these draw or these visions to the reality? So the process, guys, you can check it out on the internet. The name is Road Experience. It's in CNET site. And we start to create some ideas. We developed 9 ideas during this study, and in different ways. Some, okay, have a lot of ideas with high-tech solution. Other one is more social solutions, and the other ones mix this reality, the social techs and the high techs to solving our problem. And during this process, we create some ideas and concepts and develop this one as a concept ideas that we incubate these in the university and try to develop some prototypes and concept ideas to understand a little bit how these ideas can work and all the problems that we could have if we try to solve this in Brazil.
Also, we have experimental prototypes, so trying to bring as fast as possible these ideas to reality. And as you can see, the Future Lab tries to really accelerate the pace from future to reality. We try to do it in bringing the best people together. I mean, universities, students, professors, engineers, designers. It's really coming from concept to prototypes in a very fast and consistent way.
So, what is different from other design approaches? We create this prototype and create some scenarios here in the place that we work, and create alternative futures, and invited people from the government, people from society, business guys, to come here and see these scenarios, and it's a touchable scenarios, and the discussion what happened next. what's possible to do, what's the problem that we have. We start to design the questions more than problem solving, we understand a little bit the issues about the society and the issues with the government, the laws that we need to create, or the problem that we have in the future. If this kind of technology starts to work here, it's all the time we talking about artificial intelligence, we talk about blockchain, but true, we don't pay attention so much if what's next, what all the facts that this technology approached here in Brazil, what the fact is in our society. So we start this kind of discussion, deep discussion with the society, instead of try to create this and sell this around the world. It's not the idea. The idea here is to create more consciousness about the future, and after the discussion and these co-creation scenarios, create some possibility that makes sense for everyone.
So the last part of the session, we'd like to invite Roberta. Please come, Roberta. So Roberta works for a French company, a fleet management company called LD. And LD has decided to really building prototypes and experiment with the concept of road experience, of building a vision of the future and experiments and prototypes for developing a better road experience in Brazil. So, Roberta, welcome to our session.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
So why don't you start by sharing with everyone why ALD and yourself and your team are moving into this direction? Why have you decided to move?
There's important issues here because Roberta, I like you so much.
Yeah.
You work with the society, you work with the third sector here in Brazil, and the companies. I like to understand a little bit about the two visions, the business vision and the social issues that we have here in the.
Okay, the good part is when you are in the third sector, you have to deliver value to the society. And I like to think that when you are in a good company, you have to deliver the same value too. So it's almost the same thing, but the different part is all the time I have to think about my stakeholders, and I have to think about the society too. So it's the same for me.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Why companies are using now vision of the future, in our case, for example, to create new realities or new startups, not just the startup that we have now, but
because everything has changed. If we were used to look to the past and to plan what we want to do to the next year, for example. Now we can't do it because everything has changed. Our clients, they have changed their behavior, for example, and our competitors, I don't know how to tell you, but I even don't know who they are because they are changing so much. And we have to create our future, or we are out of the game. We want to be in the game. We want to be a good player. So we have to build our future. We are just.
Sorry, I would like to step in on that because change is, I think, really important in creating futures and getting people towards the future. So could you elaborate a bit more on the aspect of change and how people can adapt to futures?
Okay. For example, my company is specialized to offer vehicles to other companies because they need vehicles to go to do their business. For example, they have to visit other companies. They have to give this vehicle to the manager because they have to receive benefits for being in this company, for example. And now I have some clients that they just don't want cars. And why do I have to continue offer cars if they don't want? Or, for example, I'm working in a world full of data, and I'm not using data. Why? If I know that data is a value, and I know that data can help me to offer more value to my clients, should I use it or not? And for example, Here in Brazil, we have a lot of managers here. They are pretty old. I don't know if it's someone that more than 50 years old are listening to me, and I'm not intending to offend you. But now we have a lot of different people being managers. They are young, and they think in different ways, and they don't think cars are great, for example, and they don't think that just having a car is a benefit. They want more, and they are concerned about the pollution that can emit to the world. So it's changing, and we have to think. And for example, we used to have a market focus in cars, and our competitors, they were offering the same thing that we were. But now I have Uber, and Uber, they are our competitors too. And a year or 2 years ago, we didn't have it. And now we have a lot of companies that offer car sharing, and they were my competitors years ago, but now they are. And now I have a lot of people that they think it's better not to drive. For example, they think that it's better just to take in a car and be whatever they want to be, and they don't have to be responsible for a car. And this is changing. And I have a lot of people that they think that bicycle, for example, are better. So we are changing, and we have to accept it, and we have to look to the future as a good opportunity to do better work.
So this is interesting, because we are talking about this all the time, and the difference between, for example, when you create a vision of the future, and how can you get these people and make some kind of change transformation, you know? And use it to change their minds. Okay, you have now different types of clients, segmentation.
Yeah.
One that's worried about the society and the environment and everything. Another one that consider cars as a status.
Yeah.
You can use this as in a C-level as, okay,
Yeah.
like a very fast car and something like that. But work with these different people or different segment. It's hard for you guys to work with these at the same time.
Yeah, true. And the point is, well, we don't know how to do it. That's why we need to work with companies like Simnetics to understand better what what our clients are telling to us, and what could we do to offer things that could be better. And we don't know how to look to the future alone, and we don't want to do it alone. So the important thing is to know how to work with different companies, with creative people, and creating a kind of startup inside our own company. Because sometimes we can work with different startups that are just born in Brazil, for example. But you know, I think sometimes they are not ready to work with companies, and the companies, they are not ready to work with these startups. So sometimes, well, we are trying to build inside our company a startup, a company startup, if I may use this sentence, to help us to look to the future, to design new products, to design a new service, and to, of course, be ahead of our competitors, of course, and be ahead, offering a great value to our clients, because we have this opportunity, and I think we learn it.
So during this process, we need to check now another slides. Indy, you can stay here with us.
Okay.
And we now talking about that it's more about the startup builder than just buy startup. Here in Brazil, there is a movement. I believe that is different from the US, and the movement is related to corporate startups. As the startups focus on business issues and work with these companies to create new realities. And the using vision of the future, you can create some assumptions that you can choose a way to select some startup and or maybe to create this in the company. Now we start to work with the ALD to create a startup inside the company, and the work with the guys that are involved with that, and not just to, okay, you invited some startups to work with the future of the road, but we need to figure out a little bit more about another startup that we need to create with the structure that we have in ALD. So during this process, it's interesting because you can use strategic design to create give some drives to create startups and invite another startup to work with the company.
So we're heading to the end of the session, and just want to make a wrap up around the concept of strategic design and how we can move faster into the future. So strategic design for us, it's a combination between three fields of knowledge, three disciplines. One is emerging technologies. It's really trying to come up with this emerging and test experiment with emerging technologies. Design principles, design concepts, which means asking the right questions and connecting to people, to the context, and really try to bring value. And the business model, and try to bring and test with different alternative business models. Right? And the strategic design, we run from the concept, which is the very beginning, the concept idea, building experimental prototypes, and then bringing them to reality, trying to incubate them and accelerate them. And of course, there is a rate of adoption, there is a rate of diffusion of this innovation, from invention to innovation. Then all this social engagement will apply to the innovation, the early adoption, the late majority. So we try to develop here during these studies. We could realize that you can use innovation diffusion curves like a Gartner hype cycle and the social engagement by Everett Rogers. It's great to understand a little bit that when you talk about future, this approach is more social tech approach that you need to understand a little bit more how can these trends or the trends will set a new kind of future. When you are talking about it here, we all the time we discuss with the companies, the startups, and the government if you like to follow the trends or you like to be a trendsetter. This is totally different, because all the time when you read a lot about trends, to create scenarios, it's great, but you behind these trends. When you start to talk about future, you start talking about, okay, I like to be a trendsetter, and how can I do that? And this is the question that when you start to study a little bit more about the future and create these scenarios and create the opportunity, is not just to answer the questions that we have now, but create new questions, understand a little bit more about what kind of society we like to create in the future, what kind of companies we like to have in the future, or what kind of governments we'd like to work with. This is something very important to discuss when you discuss this and design the future. I know that there are a lot of companies around the world that are working with that and deal with the future, but in some different way here, we are more focused on in technology, yes, but in social tech and how can develop this and make some change making. Okay, so the ideas of the session can be found in Brazilian Portuguese edition of the book Design Strategy, and also the Spanish edition Design Strategy. So let's come to the takeaways. Maybe take a couple of questions from you. The last slide, please. So the first takeaway is futuristic approach really reduce the gap between fiction and reality. So how you do this? By introducing concept ideas, experimental prototypes, and building startups out of these prototypes and ideas. So, strategic design is transdisciplinary. Also, it combines design principles, emerging technologies, and alternative business models. So Future Lab is the best way for you to do this, to anticipate the futures by building these visions, designing new realities, and really disrupting, stretching the zeitgeist in the unique combination of invention and innovation. So the movement is triggered by the right questions. So as we said, in the example of the road experience, we started by asking how could we really redefine the experiences in the roads in a tough country with poor infrastructure like Brazil. And so people who are really entering this journey of developing of vision to the future and strategic design are really accepting the endurance of managing disruptive change and its consequences.
So during this work, you need to pay attention or what's the context that we work in, you know? Because if you work in Africa or if you work in Japan or maybe in England, these contexts will make the way that you choose trends and the vision of the future. We have a special quote here that from a guy in Brazil that is all talking about this future. This is very important. I like to finish this presentation with this free translation here from José Castello. We are sons of fiction. Every human achievement is a construction of fictional identity. Under this, we sustain ourselves to cross the desert of existence. This José Castello is a journalist here in Brazil, and I was touched with this phrase and this quote. And so guys, we try to bring here just another way to think about the future. And during this DIF event, we try to bring another way to see this from the south part of the globe. You know, I know that is more involved about economic issues or social issues,
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt here because your sound is off. I don't know what is happening, but you sounded a bit like robots, very future-proof. But anyway, I think we've came to the end of the session, so I think I might wrap it up now. I think you touch upon a very interesting subject. Looking at futures is something that we obviously are doing more and more and probably have to do more and more. Thanks a lot for that. I enjoyed your talk a lot. And for everybody viewing online, thanks a lot for being here. We have another design session coming up today at 5 p.m. It's Casper van der Meer and Jan Leijsen who will be talking about the positive social impact on design. So for that, tune in at 5 p.m. GMT. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us, and goodbye.
All right.